A very warm welcome to Kalan Platform Igniting Curious Mind has on date 8th June 2026. Central Chapter 18, the Neural System and neural control and the coordinations. As you know, the functioning of organ and organ system in our body must be coordinated to maintain the homeostasis. Coordination is the process through which two or more organs interact, compete with the functions of one another. For example, we do not do physical exercise, energy demand increase, maintenance of increased muscular activity. The supply of oxygen is also increasing. The increased supply of oxygen necessitates the increase in the rate of respiration, the heartbeat, and increased blood flow via blood vessels. When the physical exercise stops, activities of nerve, lungs, hearts, and kidney gradually return to their normal act conditions. Thus, the functions of muscles and the lungs, hearts, and blood vessels, kidney, and other organs are coordinated with the while performing a physical exercise. In our body, the neural system and the endocrine system jointly coordinates, integrate all the activity of the organs so as they function the synchronized fashions. A neural system provides an organized network of point-to-point connections for a quick coordinations. Endocrine system provides a chemical integrations through the hormone. In this chapter, you will learn through the neural system of human mechanism of neural coordinations like transmission of new nerve impulse conductions across the synapses. The neural system. A neural system of all our animals is composed of highly specialized cells called as neurons, which can detect, receive, transmit different kinds of stimuli. A neural organization is a very simple in the row vertebrates. For example, in Hydra, it's composed of network of neuron. In the neural system, it's better organized in insects, where the brain is present along with the number of ganglia and the neural tissues. The vertebrae have a more developed neural system. Human neural system. The human neural system is divided into two types: the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system, brain, and the spinal cord is the site of information of process and control. The PNS comprises all the nerve impulse of the body associated with the central nervous system, brain, and the spinal cord. The nerve fiber of the PNS are two types: afferent fiber, efferent fiber. The afferent nerve fiber transmit impulse from one tissue organ to the central nervous system. The efferent fiber transmit regulatory impulse from the CNS to concerned peripheral tissue or the organ. The PNS is divided into two divisions, that is somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Somatic nervous system relay impulse on the central nervous system to skeletal, while the autonomic nervous system transmit impulse from central nervous system to involuntary organ and smooth muscles of the body. The autonomic nervous system is further classified into synaptic neural system and parasynaptic nervous system. The visceral system is a part of peripheral nervous system, comprises a whole complex nerves, fiber, ganglia, plexus, by which an impulse travels from central nervous system to visceral and from viscera to the central nervous system. The neuron has a structural and functional unit of the neural system. The neuron is a microscopic structure composed of three major parts, mainly cell body, dendrites, axon. The cell body contains cytoplasmic with the typical cell organelles and a certain granular body called Nissel's granules, short fibers which branch repeatedly and project out of the cell body. Also contains Nissel's granules are called as dendrites. These fibers transmit impulse towards the cell body. The axon is a long fiber, distal end of the which is branched, and each branch terminates as a bulb-like structure called synaptic node, which possesses synaptic vessels containing chemicals called as neurotransmitters. The axon transmits nerve impulse away from the cell body to synapses or to the neuron muscular junctions. Based on the number of axon and dendrites, the neurons are divided into three types: multipolar with one axon to two or more dendrites found in the cerebral cortex; bipolar with one axon, one dendrites found in the retina of the eye; the unipolar cell body with one axon only, found usually in the embryonic stage. And these are types of axons, namely myelinated and non-myelinated. The myelinated nerve fibers are enveloped with the Schwann cells, which forms a myelin sheath around the axon. A gap between two adjacent myelin sheaths are called as nodes of Ranvier. The myelinated nerve fibers are found to be a spinal cords cranial nerve. The unmyelinated nerve fiber is enclosed in a Schwann cells and does not form a myelin sheath around the axons, and it's commonly found in an autonomous and somatic nervous system. The generation and conduction of nerve impulse. Axons are excitable cells because of their membrane are in polarized state. Do you know why the membranes of the neurons are polarized? Different types of ions channels are present on the neural membrane. The ion channels are selectively permeable to different ions. When the neuron is not conducting any impulse, the resulting axon membrane is comparatively more permeable to potassium ion and nearly impermeable to sodium ion. Similarly, the membrane is impermeable to negatively charged protein present in the exoplasma. Consequently, the exoplasma inside the axon contains high concentration of K plus and negatively charged protein and low concentration of Na plus. In contrast, the fluid outside the axon contains low concentration of calcium, potassiums, and high concentration of Na plus. Such concentrations of gradient and these ionic gradients across the resting membranes maintain the activity of a transport of ion by sodium potassium pump, which transports 3 Na plus towards the 2K plus into the cell. As a result, outer surface of the axon membrane possesses a positively charged while the inner surface becomes negatively charged and therefore polarized. The electrical potential difference across a resting plasma membrane is called as a resting potential. You might be curious to know about the mechanism of generations of nerve impulse for the conduction along the axon. When a stimulus is applied to at a site, a polarized membrane, and the membrane at the sites A becomes freely permeable to Na plus. This leads to a rapid influx of Na plus formed by a reversal of polarity at that site. Outer surface of the membrane becomes negatively charged and the inner becomes positively charged. The polarity of the membrane at the site A is thus reversed and hence depolarized. The electrical potential across the plasma membrane at a site A is called as action potentials, which in fact is termed as a neural impulse. At site immediately ahead the axon, site B, membrane has a positive charge on the outer surface, negative charge on the inner surface. As a result, the current flow from inner surface of A to site B. On the outer surface, current flow from B to site A. To complete the circuit current flow, hence the polarity at the site is reversed. The action potential is generated at site B. Thus, impulse action potential generated at site A arrives at sites B. The sequence is repeated along the length of the axon and consequently impulse is conducted. The rise of the stimulus induced permeability of Na plus extremely shorter lived. It's quickly followed by a rise in the permanently by K plus. Within a fractions of a second, the K plus diffuses outside the membrane and restore the resting potential of the membrane and the site of excitations and the fiber becomes more responsible for the further stimulations. Transmission of impulse. The impulse is transmitted from one neuron to another and junction known as a synapses. Synapses is formed by a membrane of a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron, which may or may not be separated by a gap called synaptic cleft. There are two types of synapses, mainly electrical synapses, chemical synapses. At electrical synapses, membrane of the pre and the postsynaptic neurons are in a very close proximity. Electrical current can flow directly from one neuron into the other across these synapses. The transmission of impulse across the electrical synapses is very similar to impulse conducted along the single axon. The impulse transmissions across electrical impulse is always faster than those across the chemical synapses. Electrical synapses are rare in our system. At a chemical synapse, the membrane of the pre and the postsynaptic neuron are separated by a fluid field called as synaptic cleft. Do you know how the presynaptic neuron transmits an impulse, an action potential across synaptic cleft to a postsynaptic neuron? Chemicals called as neurotransmitters are involved in the transmission of impulse at a synapses. Axon terminals contains vesicles filled with the neurotransmitters. When an impulse arrives arrives at axon terminal, it stimulates the movement of the synaptic vesicles towards the members where they fuse to form where the plasma membrane releases a neurotransmitter synaptic cleft. The membrane releases neurotransmitter binds to a specific receptor present on the postsynaptic membrane, thus binding ion channel, allowing the entry of ion, which can generate a new potential in the postsynaptic neuron. A new potential development may be either excretory or inhibitory. Central nervous neural system. The brain is a central information process of a organ of a body, acts as a command and control system. It controls the voluntary movement, balance of the body, function of the vital involuntary organs, lungs, hearts, kidney, thermoregulations, hunger and thirst, and cardiac 24 into 7 rhythms of a body, activities of several endocrine glands, and human behavior. It's also a site of process of vision, hearing, speech, memory, intelligence, emotion, thoughts. Human brain is well protected by its skull. Inside the skull is covered by a cranium meninges consists of an outer layer called as dura mater, which is a thin middle layer, and acanthoid, and an inner layer of which is contact with the brain tissues, the pinna mater. The brain can be divided into three major parts: the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. The forebrain. The forebrain consists of a cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus. Cerebrum forms a major part of the human brain. A deep cleft divides the cerebrum longitudinally into two halves, which are termed as a left and right cerebral hemisphere. The hemispheres are connected by a tract of nerve fibers called as corpus callosum. The layer of cells covers the cerebral hemisphere is called as cerebral cortex and is stored into prominent folds. The cerebral cortex is referred to as a gray matter due to its grayish appearance. The neural cells bodies are concentrated where here given the color. The cerebral cortex contains motor area and sensory area and larger regions that are neither clearly sensory nor motor functions. These regions are called as associated areas, are responsible for complex functions like intersensory association and memory and the communications. The fibers of the tracts are covered with the myelin sheaths which constitutes the inner part of the cerebral hemisphere. They give an opaque white appearance to the layer and hence called as white matter. Cerebrum wraps around the structure called as thalamus, which is a major coordinating center for the sensory and the motor signals. Another very important part is the hypothalamus, which lies in the base of the thalamus. The hypothalamus contains a number of centers which control the body temperature, urge for eating and drinking. It also contains several groups of neurosecretory cells which secretes hormones called as hypothalamic hormones. The inner part of cerebral hemispheres and the group of associated deep structures like amygdala, hippocampus, etc. form a complex structure called as limbic lobe and limbic system. Along the hypothalamus is involved a regulation of a sexual behavior, expression of emotional reaction, excitement, pleasure, rage, fear, and motivations. The midbrain. Midbrain is located between the thalamus, hypothalamus of the forebrain and the bones of the hindbrain. The canal called as cerebral aqueduct passes through the midbrain. The dorsal portion of the midbrain consists of four brown swelling lobes called as corpora quadrigemina. The hindbrain pons, cerebrum, and medulla, also called as medulla oblongata pons, consist of a fiber tract that interconnects the different regions of the brain. The cerebellum has very convoluted surface in order to provide additional space for the more neuron. The medulla of the brain is connected by a spinal cord. The medulla contains center of which controls the respiration, cardiovascular reflexes, gastric secretion. The three major regions take part: the brain stem, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. Brain stem forms a connection between the brain and the spinal cord. Summary: the neural system coordination and integration function as well as a metabolic and homeostatic activities as an organ. The neurons and the functions units of the neural systems are excitable cells due to different concentration gradients of the ions across the membrane. The electrical potential differences across a resting neural membrane is called as resting potential. The neural impulse is conducted along the axon membrane in the form of wave depolarizations and repolarization. Synapses is a form of membrane of presynaptic neuron and the postsynaptic neuron, which may or may not be separated by a gap called a synaptic cleft. The chemical involved in the transmission of impulse at a chemical synapse is called as neurotransmitters. The human neural system consists of two parts: central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system consists of a brain and the spinal cord, and the brain can be divided into three major parts, that is forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain. The forebrain consists of cerebrum, thalamus. The hypothalamus cerebrum is longitudinally divided into the two halves that are connected by corpus callosum. A very important part of the forebrain is called the hypothalamus, controls the body temperature, eating, drinking. The inner parts of the cerebrum, cerebellar hemisphere, a group of associated deep structure of a complex structure called limbic system, which is concerned with the olfactory autonomic response, regulation of sexual behavior, expression of emotional reactions and motivations. The midbrain receives the integration visual, tactile and auditory input. The hindbrain comprises the pons cerebellum medulla. The cerebellum integrates information received from the semicircular canals of the ear and the auditory system. The medulla contains center which control respiration, cardiovascular reflexes, gastric secretions. The pons constitutes of the fibril tracts that interconnect the different regions of the brain. Thank you for watching. You are tuned into Color Platform, igniting the curious mind. Palanka. Skeletal system. Skeletal system consists of framework of bones and few cartilage. This system has a significant role in movement shown by the body. Imagine chewing a food without the jaw bones and walking around without a limb bones. Bone and cartilage are specialized connective tissue. The former has a very hard matrix due to calcium salts in it, and the later has a significantly pliable matrix due to a chondroitin salts. In human being, the system is made up of 206 bones and a few cartilage. This is grouped into two principal divisions, axial and the appendicular skeletal. The axial skeletal comprises of 80 bones distributed along the main axis of the body. The skull, the vertebral column, and the sternum and the ribs constitute the axial skeletal. The skull is composed of two sets of bones, cranial and facials, totally of 22 bones. The cranial bones of 80 number, and they are form a hard protective outer covering, calcium for the bone, cranium for the brain. The facial regions made up of 14 skeletal elements which forms the front part of the skull. A single U-shaped bone is called as hyoid and is present at the base of the buccal cavity. Each middle ear contains three tiny bones, that is malleolus, incisors and stapes, collectively called as ear ossicles. The skull region articulates with the superior regions of the vertebral column with the help of two occipital condyles, that is condylic skull. The vertebral column is formed of 28 series of arranged units called vertebrae, and it's dorsally placed. It extends from the base of the skull and constitutes the main framework of the trunk. Each vertebra has a central hollow portion, neural canal, through which the spinal cord passes. The first vertebrae is the altus, and it articulates with the occipital condyles. The vertebral column is differentiated into cervical, thoracic, cervical 7, thoracic 12, lumbar 5, scaral 1 fused, and glial, that is one fused region of starting from the skull. The number of cervical vertebrae are 7 in almost all the mammals, including human beings. The vertebral columns protect the spinal cord, support the heads, and serves as a point of attachment for the ribs and musculature for the back. The sternum is a flat bone on the vertebral midline of the thorax. There are 12 pairs of ribs. Each rib is a thin flat bones connected dorsally to the vertebral column, ventrally to the sternum. It has two articulation surface on the dorsal end and hence called as bicephalic. The first pairs of the ribs are called as true ribs, and the dorsally they are attached to thoracic vertebrae, ventrally connected to the sternum with the help of a hyaline cartilage. 8, 9, 10 pairs of ribs do not articulate directly with the sternum but join the seventh rib with the help of a hyaline cartilage. These are called as vertebrocorridal ribs. The last two pairs, 11th and 12th, of the ribs are not connected ventrally and are therefore called floating ribs. Thoracic vertebrate ribs and sternum together forms a mid-cage. The bones of the limbs along with their girdle constitutes the appendicular skeletal. Each limb is made up of 30 bones, and the bones of the hands are humerus, the radius and ulna, and the carpals and distal bones and 80 number. The metacarpals, palm bones and 5 number. The phalanges digits at 14 in number. The femur, that is the thigh bone, the longest bone, the tibia and the fibula, tarsal, the ankle bone, 7 in number. The metatarsal, 5 in number. The phalanges digits, that is 14 in number, are the bones of the legs, hind limbs. A cup-shaped bone called as patella covers the knee ventrally and the kneecap. The pectora and the pelvic girdle bones help in the articulations of the upper and the lower limbs. Respectively, the axial skeleton, each of the girdle is formed by the two halves. Each half of the pectoral girdle consists of a calvicle and the scapula. The scapula is the largest triangular flat bone situated in the dorsal parts of the thoracic between the second and the seventh ribs. The dorsal flat triangular body carpals has a slightly elevated ridge called as spines, which project as a flat expanded process called as acromion. The clavis depressions clavis articulates within this. Below the acromion is an depression called as a glenoid cavity, which articulates with the head of the humerus to the forms the shoulder joint. Each clavicule is a long slender bone to curvature. This bone is commonly called as collar bones. The pelvic girdle consists of two coxal bones, and each coxal bone is formed by the fusion of three bones: ilum, isthmus, and the pubis. At the point of the fusions of the above bone, there is a cavity called as acetubulum, to which the thigh bone articulates. The two halves of the pelvic girdle meets ventrally to form the pubic symphysis containing the fibrous cartilage. Joints are essential of all type of movement involving the bony parts of the body. Locomotory movement are not exceptions to this. Joints are the point of contact between the bones and between the bones and cartilage. The force generated by the muscle is used to carry out the movement through the joints. Whether the joint acts as a fulcrum, the movability of these joints vary depending upon the different factor. Joints being classified into three major structure forms: fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. The fibrous joints do not allow any movement. This type of joint is shown as a flat skull bones, which fuses end to end with the help of dense fibrous connective tissue in the form of clutches to form the cranium. The cartilaginous joints, the joint bones involve the two joined together with the help of cartilage. Joints between the adjacent vertebrates in the vertebral column is of this pattern and is permits limited movement. The synovial joints are the presence of fluid-filled synovial cavity between the articulating surface of the two bones. Such an arrangement allows considerable movements, and these joints help in locomotion and many other movement. The ball and socket joint between the humerus and the pectoral girdle, hinge joint, knee joint, pivot joint keep between the atlas and the axis. The girdle joint between the carpals and the scandal joint between the carpal and the metacarpals of thumb are some of the examples. The disorder of muscular and the skeletal system. The myasthenia gravis, autoimmune disorder affecting the neuromuscular junctions between the fatigue, weakness, and paralysis of skeletal muscles. Muscular dystrophy, progressive degenerations of skeletal muscle, mostly due to genetic disorder. The tendency, the rapid scampums, wide contractions in a muscle due to low calciums in the body fluid. The arthritis, that is inflammations of joint. Osteoporosis, age-related disorder characterized by decreasing bone mass and increasing chances of fracture. Decreased levels of estrogen is a common causes. The GLOD, that is the inflammation of joint due to accumulation of uric acid crystals. Summary: the movement is essential features of all living beings. The protoplasmic streaming and the ciliary movement of fins, limbs, wings are some of the exhibited by the animals. The voluntary movement which causes animals to change its place is called the locomotion. Animal moves generally in search for food, shelter, mates and breeding and ground and better climate and protect themselves. The cells of the human body exhibits amoeboid ciliary and muscular movement. Locomotion and many other movements requires coordination muscular activity. Three types of muscles are present in the body. Skeletal muscles are attached to the skeletal elements. They appear straighted and are voluntary in nature. Visceral muscles present in the inner walls of visceral organs are non straighted and involuntary. The cardiac muscles are the muscles which of the hearts. They are straighted and branched and involuntary. Muscle possess excitability, contractibility, extensibility, elasticity. Muscle fiber is an anatomical unit of muscles. Each of muscle fibers has many parallel arranged myofibrils. Each myofibrils contains many serially arranged called as sarcomere, which are the functional units. Each sarcomere has a central a band and a thick myosin filaments and the two half I bands made up of a thin actin filaments on the either sides of the marked Z lines. The actin and myosin are the polymerized proteins and the contractiles. The active sites of the myosin on the resting actin filaments are masked by the protein troponin. Myosin head contains ATPase and ATPC binding sites, active sites of actin. The motor neuron carries the signals due to the muscle fibrils, which generates an actions potential in it. This causes a release of calcium sacroplasmic reticulum. The calcium activates actin binding to the myosin head to form a cross bridge. These cross bridges pull the actin filament, causing them to slide over the myosin filaments, thereby causing a contraction. The calciums are then returned to a sacroplasmic reticulum, which inactivate the actin. The cross bridges are broken and then muscle relax. The repeated stimulated muscles leading to the fatigue. Muscles are classified as red and white fibrils based primarily on the amounts of red colored myoglobin pigments in them. Bones and cartilage are constitutes of the skeletal system. The skeletal system divisible into axial and appendicular. The skull, vertebrates, column, rib, and sternum constitutes the axial skeletal. The limb bone and the griddle forms the appendicular skeletal. The three types of joints are formed between the bones, between bones and between cartilage fibrous cartilaginous synovial. The synovial joints allow for considerable movement and thereby play a very significant role in the locomotions. Thank you for watching. You are tuned in to Kalam platform igniting curious mind where you and I grow together. Thank you.